Good evening, I'm Dike Rostant. Welcome back to the TTT News. The Ministry of Health and its line minister are taking a harder look at non-communicable diseases and the role they play in making persons more susceptible to the ravages of COVID-19. Now, whether you call it a COVID curve or you are developing your house mouse look or whatever manner you choose to describe it, the increased sedentary lifestyle has caused a change in many physiques. And this is at a time when we have the juxtaposition of different types of exercise being curtailed, along with the increased use of the word comorbidities. Now, we are going in depth on fitness during the pandemic with fitness expert Adrian Cordner. Welcome, Adrian. How you do?
I'm fine, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start off asking about your experience in terms of feedback that you would have been getting, just people that you would be interacting with. The Battle of the Bulge during the pandemic, what are some of those things that come to mind when I ask you that?
Well, the pandemic presents itself as a unique challenge for many people. There are individuals who have become accustomed to being outside and doing the activities. And with the lockdown, you may find that these people, they tend to go through withdrawal symptoms, whereby the activity that they enjoy doing outside, because there's a restriction and they can no longer do it, it sort of erodes their motivation. So even though that they're inside, they don't feel that desire to continue doing what they like to do because the element in which they normally do it is not accessible. And that presents itself with a unique set of issues. So you're eating every day, but you're not exercising because you no longer have the environment to function in. And then now you start seeing things like weight gain and other issues cropping up as a result.
No, I like the fact that you talk about the environment because there's some people, yes, they want to work out, but they need the smell of old iron. They need to go to a certain type of gym. There's some people, they love to be able to be exercising, looking very fancy, and people looking through glass planes and seeing them running on the treadmill and all these sorts of things.
Right.
So what are some of those alternatives when these exercise routines, be it outdoor or indoor, have been curtailed, have been changed, so people need to look to go different routes?
Well, you have the likes of yoga, which is quite popular. It's a very holistic way of doing exercise. You can stretch, you can build some degree of muscle. It's not entirely that like if you're going to be pumping iron, but it does offer itself a unique way of working your muscles. There's also balance and breathing. You have calisthenics, which is using your own body weight to do an exercise. So squats, lunges, push-ups, jumping jacks. You also have Tai Chi, and this would tie in well for the older community, whereby movement may be limited, but it's not entirely non-existent.
Now, Adrian, I want to dig a horrors with you a little bit because we're talking about Tai Chi and these sorts of exercises good for the older population and making me, I want to hold up the mirror with and he talking about me. Because in terms of like the was it high intensity interval training or the high impact stuff that some people, the joints may not be that good. So in terms of like looking at some of those things that we can do and even the way we would have spoken about calisthenics, I know some people talk about the holy trinity of push-ups, squats, and back bridges.
Right.
But is there something that you suggest as a, okay, well, this should be your baseline. You should get at least this in per day. When someone asks you something like that, what do you say?
If you can get in at least, I would say 20 minutes worth of exercise, 20 minutes. Within that 20 minutes, you can do squats, you can do push-ups, you can do crunches, leg lifts, side bends, you can do hyperextensions on the mat, you can do twists for your torso, you can do things like stretching. All of that can be done in 20 minutes. It does not take much to get an exercise routine done. It does take a degree of focus, discipline, and internal motivation, but it's not entirely possible.
All right, but in that 20 minutes, is there a certain amount of calories that you're supposed to be looking at, a certain amount of exertion? Because someone who has more mass, more weight, more bulk, more muscle may need to do a little more. So how does that 20 minutes kind of play out?
Well, if one understands their own limitations, so you mentioned joints just now in terms of joints not functioning or being able to handle the workload. So you need to know what your limitations are. If that is the case, then you adjust accordingly. So let's say someone is maybe obese and still wants to get into some kind of activity, then you may want to pace yourself over that time frame, because being overweight and trying to get into an exercise program can be challenging physically. So whereas someone of a lighter structure may be able to, as we like to say in the field, you may be able to hit hard and go. Someone of a heavier stature may not be able to do that in the same 20-minute time frame. So it's all about knowing your limitations.
And one of the things I want to ask about, though, Adrian, is moving from not even necessarily exercising outside, but being a lot more outside, moving, going to this area, going to that. Have you heard or have you noticed, was it possibility or potential of a change in that kind of movement leading to an increase in NCDs? Because I can see the possibility of someone, okay, well, you're not eating the best, you're not necessarily getting as much sleep as you should, but because you're moving, because these things are happening, it kind of offsets your diet, it offsets some of the wrong things that you're doing. But when you become a little more sedentary, you're at home. We had someone we spoke to recently, they spoke about grazing. You want something to motivate you, or you're not even really hungry, but to stimulate you, you eat something. Does that lend itself towards an increase in NCDs from your perspective?
It does. Let me preface this by this statement. Movement is life. Period. Movement is life. The minute you stop moving, use it or lose it is applied. Like everything else. There's a term that I like to use called biological rust. And that simply says, if you stop using you will disintegrate. I mean, if it is that we're looking for a set term as to what happens with movement when it's no longer there, movement is the start of everything. And grazing, which is what people like to call snacking, which is a lovely little name for that, it can lead to non-communicable diseases. Now, when you move, you utilize energy to do so. Muscles work, they produce movement, and that kind of thing. If nutritionally you are not giving yourself that which is required to facilitate health, then you are going to end up with some issues. So one of the things that would have happened during a pandemic would have been people engaging in eating as a way of offsetting all manner of mental destabilization. So we're looking at things like depression, anxiety, lack of motivation. You still want to do it, but the impetus for it is not there, right? Now, if you do that and you're grazing on refined sugars and you're grazing on trans fats and you're grazing on excess carbohydrates, but you're not moving to burn these items off, because these things are they add to your caloric intake overall. So if you're not moving, then you're ingesting calories with no avenue for release. The body is smart, it's going to store these things as body fat. And hence the reason why you may come out of your pandemic a little rounder than usual.
Yeah, we're using the term COVID curve. But, but after we take a short break, we're going to be coming back and talking about the importance and significance of having personal trainers, people you can bounce these kind of ideas off of. But we are speaking with fitness expert Adrian Cordner. Stay with us. We return with more. Welcome back to In Depth with me, Dike. Now we are speaking with fitness expert Adrian Cordner about fitness during the pandemic. And Adrian, where do personal trainers fit into this equation?
We are a unique bunch of people. We use discomfort to help people get rid of discomfort. If there was ever something to be said about that, most people have less than polite things to say about personal trainers, but in truth and in fact, it's about motivation. It's about getting the individual from point A to point B. Because everybody has a point B. They know where they are. They know where they would like to be. The transition between where they are to where they want to go, that's where we come in. Personal trainers, we provide an insight into the correct way to get to your goal, which would include correct form for how your exercises are done, nutritional advice for what you should eat, what you shouldn't eat, what you can have, what you should have in moderation, and so forth. In doing so, it's about educating the individual about their own well-being and showing them the best way possible to their eventual goal. But the idea here is to give the knowledge required to help the individual to ensure that, okay, I am 50 pounds overweight, I need to get 50 pounds off. What is the best way to do this? How can I do it without injuring myself? Hence, a personal trainer to guide you.
But Adrian, I have a personal grouse with all you. I find all you can't count. I tell you tell me it was one more about 5 ago. So I don't. So, but at the same time, if you say getting from point A to point B, I understand it. But in terms of that motivation, and I like the fact that you speak about the educational aspect of it, because sometimes there's some little things that can make all the difference in the world in terms of the way you stack your joints, the way when you're going down into a lunge, not having your knee over the plumb line of your big toe. What are some of those things that you try to get people to do even when they're not with you, but to be mindful of?
Well, if you're not with a personal trainer and you still want to do your own thing, form. Ego has a way it can overtake what you want to do. So you may have a desire to look like J-Lo, or you want to look like some runway model. But one, you're not built like that. Two, you may not have the disposable income to have a surgeon work on you to get where you want to go. But you do have the energy, you do have health, you do have working muscles. Those things combined can really be powerful, meaning that if you get the right form, which is how you do exercise, and you follow through with correct nutrition, then marry those two things together with motivation and your goal, and you want to get the result that you're looking for. It's not impossible. Challenging, but not impossible.
All right, but with that in mind, if you had someone who's saying, okay, well, as you said, I want to do my own thing, what are some of those pros and cons of things like YouTube? Saying, okay, well, I like how this person looking at this and they're showing me how to do that. So what are some of those pros and cons?
Pros for YouTube videos are they offer you diversity. There's a wide range of videos offering everything from HIIT training to yoga to Tabata training, wide range. The con part of it is this: there are people who have conditions that require specific movements. And some of these videos may not lend themselves to the benefit or healing of those conditions. So take into consideration someone who is overweight and gets into doing a YouTube video that involves a lot of jumping. That does not bode very well for their knees or their joints. So they may want to resort to something else of a lighter or low impact nature. So the YouTube videos, as diverse and, well, sometimes educational as they could be, you still need to understand what your limitations are and don't just dive in. That's one. Two, your general health. You may actually want to think about things like your heart rate, blood pressure, your general well-being before just diving into a YouTube video, because suddenly you are motivated. Suddenly there's a pair of jeans you want to fit into, you're just going to dive in. Suddenly there's a suit or an event. It doesn't work like that. You really need to start working your way in.
And with that in mind, one of the other things I also think about is someone who, like you said, you do something that's a little more high impact than your body is able to sustain or to it shouldn't even attempt at that point in time. And then there comes an injury, and then they say, see me, I real good. And you stop and you slide back even further than square one.
Right. More often than not, people who experience discomfort Sometimes it's shocking. It's shocking because you're asking someone to move out of their comfort zone. Um, Suddenly you're asking your legs to do things it was not accustomed to, and there's a lot of protest going on. There is questions being asked as in, why are you doing this to us? We are not ready. Why are you doing to us? We never asked to do this. But if you're willing, every goal has a challenge, and the aim is to overcome that challenge. As I told one client just recently, your challenge reaps its rewards. So if you're willing to put in the work, then the reward is going to come. Patience with yourself is paramount.
So that patience and moving forward, one foot in front of the other. What are some of those tips, tricks, advice you would give to someone to, one, maintain form, as you said, but also
Right.
being consistent. So it's not as though, okay, well, I hate to use the example of buying a suit a little smaller for our carnival costume and then saying I'm going to work into it. But in terms of staying consistent, long haul, what are some of those things you suggest?
Be patient, be patient, be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not. The body hates being forced into something that it's not ready for. It will protest. But if you approach it from small bites, so let's say you want to lose 50 pounds, you're not going to aim to lose 50 pounds in a week. That's just impractical. But if you go 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds a week, then if you add up those increments, it is going to add up to your 50-pound goal. So you have to exercise levels of patience. It would also be wise to understand that the one size fit all doesn't always work. So what will work for person A may not necessarily work for person B. Of course, there are some guidelines that you would like to follow in terms of nutrition. You would like to keep your carbohydrate consumption to, I would say, not a minimum, but you really want to keep it in a mid-range so that you don't go over. Too many carbs, well, you get nice and round COVID curve. You would also like to keep things like your protein consumption in an adequate manner. Water consumption, that's another thing. Many people do not drink water unless there is sugar and fizz, and that's also an issue. So water is something that a lot of people also need to consume. Water is responsible for a lot of metabolic issues, flushing in kidneys, heart rate, blood flow, nutrition delivery, regulation of temperature. So all of these things are essential for drinking water. So that will also be part of going forward regime to ensure that you keep adequate.
All right, so if we have, okay, you're saying patience, you're saying form. If I want to lose that 50 pounds, I want to start carrying water by my neck again, how do I start? Where do you start?
Well, you start basic. And basic being, you can start with walking. That is as basic as it gets. Not walking like if you're going for a stroll, but walking with a purpose. So let's say you're going to go around Queen's Park Savannah and you would like to complete your Savannah in under 30 minutes. That's a goal. Now, as the weeks go by, you try to shave off 1 minute. So 30 turns to 29, turns to 28, and so forth. And eventually, you may be able to do an entire Savannah in, let's say, I would say probably 25 minutes. I mean, maybe I'm just being hopeful here, but there are people who can cover that distance, right? But it's just an example of going from point A to point B in increments. That way there's limited stress.
All right, so we have about 30 seconds more. What is the one thing you want people to take away about fitness during the pandemic, Adrian?
Your health has weight. It is a measurable facet of life. Without health, you cannot function. Without good health, you cannot enjoy the things you have worked for, inclusive of your fitness goals. So guard your health. Guard your health. Keep it. Watch your nutrition. Movement is life. Exercise. Get some kind of exercise in. It doesn't matter. If it means just standing up and raising one knee 25 times, the idea is you are getting into an activity that can lend itself overall to the other aspects of your life that may need help correcting whatever. But the idea here is to start basic and start slow and gradual. have your goal in focus, stay focused.
Have your goal in focus, stay focused. Thank you so much, Adrian Cordner, and thank you for tuning into In Depth with me, Dike. On behalf of the entire TTT News team, thank you for joining.